Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to get it right.
I'm Meighan and that was Veronica. We're both buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mums. But that's a good thing because between us we've got over 40 years experience and we are going to share with you bucket loads of stories about avoidable mistakes. Together we're going to make sure that you get unbiased and real information that you can rely on so you can get where you want to be without missing a step.
Now, we've got loads of great tips for you in this episode, and if you'd like more useful tools, head over to the website homebuyeracademy.com.au. There you'll find free checklists that you can download, a free mini course on how to price a property, and our Where to Buy workshop for only $39. Priceless stuff, really.
Bargain. But before we get into the interesting stuff in this week's episode, here's the boring bit, the disclaimer. You of course know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field of expertise. Now, we've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording, but things change. So check with the relevant government authority or your advisors to get the most up-to-date information.
In this episode, we're following the journey of one first home buyer who has conquered the mountain.
Woohoo!
We're going to hear about the lessons they learnt, whether their assumptions were right or wrong, the mistakes they made and those that were avoided, and ultimately how they sealed the deal. Mike is a Home Buyer Academy graduate and we're so excited to be sharing your story today. Thank you for coming along and joining us, Mike.
My pleasure, Veronica.
Hi, Mike. Good to see you again. We
G'day.
do miss our students after the course sort of ends. But let's start at the beginning. Where were you up to in your property search when we first met you?
I was all over the place. So, being a first home buyer, it very much about affordability. We were thinking anywhere from the Northern Beaches because, that's a hot spot at the moment, isn't it?
I'll just jump in and say you bought in Sydney.
Sydney.
So
Yes.
just so anyone can get there. Yep.
Northern Beaches of New South Wales, in Sydney. So we were looking everywhere from Mona Vale all the way up to Freshie, and then back into the lower North Shore, Wollstonecraft, Neutral Bay, Cremorne. We've been renting in Neutral Bay for the last 3 years. Love it here. It's got all these great little parks for my daughter to run around. She's 2, so we needed a bit of room, but we don't know what's ahead of us as far as size. But we kind of all right, we're looking around. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Eventually we decided on an area, Wollstonecraft. So, yeah.
So before we get to how you eventually decided on that, when you're looking everywhere, and we're talking quite a big geographical range there, I mean, how are you trying to work out, A, where you should land, and B, what you're looking at, and C, how much these properties, are worth?
Yeah, I think we went from this idea around where we're going to get the most bang for our buck. So that's why we looked at the edge being Mona Vale and thought, Warriewood, Mona Vale, you can get a 3-bedroom unit townhouse for around the same kind of money. And then, we went through the Home Buyer Academy and started putting in a bit of a framework around how we were going to make our decision. And it also came back to what do my wife and I, what do we value differently? And so that was really important that we put that on paper. We definitely needed to have a drink when we did that one. So yeah, we took your advice, did the homework, and we put it down on paper. And we were kind of similar, but there were certain things where I was like, all right, I'm going to have to budge here on my request, but I will also then accomplish some other goals. So that was really how we kind of came to that area is writing down what our core needs were.
Oh, you're doing your 3 Ps.
Yes, the 3 Ps. And it is
where to
funny.
buy.
Yeah, I know. It's that thing about there's all that largely common ground, but those little outlier things that you sort of get hung up on. And some, I've met in my business, and you're probably the same, Meighan, you meet people that have been looking for sometimes years and they get focused on the differences rather than all the similarities that they want. Yeah. And so how did you, what you ultimately bought then, and we'll get to that in a minute, how did that differ? Is that what you imagined you'd buy when you first started looking?
No, I mean, we went through this process where we were like, okay, we want to get a good quality property, at least the best quality property for the money, but we also had these hopes and dreams of having a 3-bedder that we know that we could have for years and years and years, way past the 5-6 year requirement and maybe 10 years, at least living in it. And so we kind of looked at it and went, all right, okay, if that's what our goal is, let's look at where we can find properties in our budget for those areas. And that's why we started at that kind of end. And we looked at DY and we looked at Mona Vale, Warriewood, and quickly, and even Willoughby, we kind of quickly realized that, for us to get a good quality product, we were really going to have to up our budget. And I didn't want to put that kind of stress on myself and my family, because I knew how I reacted to stress, financial stress in the past, just through making bad decisions with cars and things like that, in my early 20s, as so many of us do. And so, that was an influencing factor. And we just decided, all right, let's try and go for a large 2-bedroom, and hopefully we can find a study or something along those lines that enables me to have a room or an area to kind of do work and things like that. So that helped us to evolve the thought process there, and then ended up getting a really large 2-bedder in Wollstonecraft. Yeah.
So an average 2-bedder, Veronica, in Sydney, in the areas that we're talking about, they'd be, about 80 square metres? Yeah,
probably 80 to 90. 90 is like a good size one. So what's the size of the one you've got?
What did you get?
Yeah, it's about 100 square metres internally, and then another 14 or 17, I forgot what it is, on for the garage. So we've also got a lock-up garage.
Fabulous. Okay.
Yes. Now,
so you didn't get the 3 bedrooms, but you actually got a good size in the unit itself.
It's a 1977 Mirvac building, double brick everywhere, which is causing some issues when it comes to trying to get the NBN installed. But other than that, it's great. Yeah, it's all in good nick. It's got great arches that kind of create that long, all those little things. We're getting floorboards put down at the moment. It's just in the process of being painted. The kitchen didn't even have a dishwasher. So this was original.
Tell us about the unit. Tell us about, what was it when you looked at your list and what you wanted and what it had and how did it all come about? Tell us the story around how you came across it and what it was that you compromised on and what did you tick on your list?
Right. So the location was really important. That was probably the first thing. So location was needed to be close to transport, because we didn't want to buy a second car. So it needed to be close to a train station or just good bus route. It needed to be at least 2-bedroom with decent sized bedrooms, and preferably an L shape. And a bathroom and a kitchen that we could kind of do up ourselves. We were kind of looking for something that we could do up ourselves a bit and add value to the property. We wanted to make sure that it had rental appeal as well, so that if in the event that when we grow out of it, we can rent it out at a nice point. And it needed to have a big balcony, because when it's raining and you have a toddler, that is the hardest thing in the world.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter if it's a boy or girl. My daughter is wants to explosive. She's running around the house constantly. Don't know. The reason why I've got my headset in is because I can hear my daughter in the background running around the apartment we're living in right now. So we wanted to have these things and a big balcony. And at first, when I saw it online, I can talk about how we found it later on. Yeah. But when we looked at it, my wife was looking online going, I don't like this at all. I was like, look, but the core of it, the essence of it, let's look at it. It's got good value there. I can see it. She walked in, she looked at the balcony, and she could see all the green, all the trees and everything from the balcony. She saw that there was a second balcony. She's like, oh, we can have a table there. And she pictured herself there. And that was what did it for us, I think. Yeah.
That's really interesting. So you looked at online, she wasn't quite there for it, but when she saw it in person, there was some emotional reaction by the sound of it.
Totally. And there's been other properties where that's been the case as well. But for whatever reason, they just weren't the right property for us in the long run. And whether it was that financial discussion, we're like, yeah, in order for us to get that one, we're going to have to, go 100K more than where we're at the moment. And that's going to do this to us. So we could do it, but do you really want to deal with me when I'm stressed? Like, it's just not worth it.
You have to be able to live together as well.
I want a divorce. Thank you very much.
Not when you got a mortgage.
Yep.
No. Let's talk about how you found this property. Was it on Domain or realestate.com? Was it on the portals, or how did you come across it?
One of the things that I've learned from working with the Home Buyer Academy is that if you're not going to hire a professional, and we really wish we could have, but I just don't think we had the budget initially. The floorboards are now getting put down with the budget that we had. We took the advice from the Home Buyer Academy, and we just did a lot of prep work. So I went out and added myself on, I took a couple of hours out of work and just went online and started researching all of the real estate agents in the area that I think that we wanted to live in the core areas. We picked about 3 suburbs and just added myself to all of their mailing lists. And so that got us access to the semi-off-market or the off-market-ish kind of properties. I don't think anything's off-market these days. And so we were getting these emails, and I was like, all right, might as well look through the emails. And that's when we found this particular property. I was like, oh, okay, it's and that's why I went in and saw it, and then I started asking questions. Why can't I find this on Domain? Why can't I find this on realestate.com? And the lovely agent Stuart said to me, oh, it's an 88-year-old lady who is moving to a home, and she doesn't have the money to put it on those kinds of those websites. So we're kind of just doing this off our database, and but we've got a lot of interest. And I was like, oh, that's great, good to see. And just as I left, I noticed that there was, there's multiple people on the agent list when on all these places. So I called up the other person. I said, hey, I'm interested in this property. Have you got any bids yet? And just started scooping to find out more information. He goes, look, we had one offer, but it fell through because of finance and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, oh, you don't actually have any offers at the moment? He goes, yeah, the one we had just fell through. It's a shame, but I expect to sell it real soon. I was like, okay, all right, thanks, mate. And we thought about it. And then we were just like, all right, we've got to put in an offer. Otherwise, we're going to miss out because it's starting to heat up. This is in COVID, but you can see it was happening. And then just put in the offer, and they said, great, okay, well, I'll take that to the owner. And yeah.
How did you come up with the offer? So tell us about that process. What did you go through? What were the things that you were looking at? Did you just pluck the number out of the air? I'm sure you didn't, because you've done the course. But...
We hope you didn't.
No, so, you talk about having a team around you. And you can do a lot of study yourself. So I went on to realestate.com, started looking for comparable sales in the area. I went through the process that the Home Buyer Academy outlines, and that was helpful. And I worked out that properties in that area, the 80s, the 90 square foot, were going for around that 1.065, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on the aspect and the street address and things like that. So I thought, all right, I've seen one that's kind of similar. And I thought, all right, it's kind of similar square foot wise, but it doesn't have it, and it's been renovated. But this one hadn't been renovated, but it was way bigger. So I thought, all right, there's some value there. I reckon, the point I need to go at is like 1.065, and that's going to be my number. Then, without providing that number to the agents, I called up my broker. That's the team at Wealthful. And I asked them, what are your thoughts on this offer? And they had access to information, some of the other property value sites. And they said, well, look, it's valuing at this. So I think that you probably need to go a little bit higher than that, just because of the market, and that, and the number that you're telling me right now is probably a good number. And so I had that feedback, and I'm like, all right, I feel confident with this number. It makes sense on paper. It's making sense with other good, knowledgeable people in the market. This is what I'm going with.
It's interesting, that process. Wealthful, just by the way, that's Chris Bates's business, and he's my co-host on the Elephant in the Room.
You need to have Ben on there as well. Ben is a legend.
Ben's great.
So Ben's the dude. He's Brisbane-based, Ben, too, isn't he?
He is, yes. Yep. I have met Ben. Yep.
So they are unusual in that they are right into property, right into it.
Yeah.
And so they do a very, very good understanding of property. And so most brokers don't have that level of understanding, but they do have access to information that the average buyer doesn't. And that is all those generally core logic is what they use. But what you did first was actually do your own research first, and then effectively checking that against the broker to make sure that you're covered in terms of.
Well, sanity check. Yeah.
Sanity check.
And whether you're going to get the money. Like, is that likely to stack up because you're going to have to get a valuation? Is the data pointing in the right direction? I guess
yes.
So you're making that sort of, so it's a sanity check, but it's also really practical and pragmatic, because you're saying, well, that's fine that I'm going to offer this money. Is the bank still going to lend it to me?
Yeah, definitely, because that was one of the other concerns that came up, right, is just because this is an aggressive market, just because I value something at this rate, will the banks and will anyone else? I can't, those guys are amazing, and the banks took forever to get the pre-approval done, forever. Like we were waiting months and months.
It's long processing.
And these great
time.
rates. They're fantastic. I think like 1.94 or something along those lines with St. George, but it's like it took forever, and we missed out on a couple of properties that we liked, but for that reason we ended up still getting something that is probably a much better property for us.
Funny how these things turn out sometimes, isn't it?
That overall process helped me to just live in the heat of it and kind of go, bugger, did I miss out on that one? And, yeah.
That's hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm really...
You should have seen my missus. Missus found it a little harder.
I'm really interested, Mike. Some people talk to us about, they're going through the course and they have this aha moment, I didn't realise that I didn't know that. Did you have one? Did you have anything like that when you were actually doing the course, or when you started applying what you'd learned through the course to your actual search?
It was probably more so afterwards. After just doing the actual, that additional research, I think the aha moment was coming to grips with the fact that we couldn't go with a 3-bedroom, and we had to go look at a 2-bedroom, and that immediately, meant that we could get a much better quality product, and that was so it was like this. All right, how long are we going to be in this property? We could probably be in there 5 years, create bunk beds, all of that kind of stuff. And so it was a relief, but it was that aha moment. Right. Yeah.
That's interesting. So when you say quality, tell me how you're defining quality.
So I've been listening to podcasts on property, yours, Veronica, the Property Couch, Home Buyer Academy, all of these different podcasts for years now, and everyone's got pretty much the same kind of comments. So aspect, location, livability, whether it's how many boxes does it tick as far as whether it's going to be it's going to be a property that an investor would like, a first home buyer, a downsizer, those things. Overall size, just to make sure that it had the basics. Layout, feng shui, if you want to call it, just things like that. Like it ticks some boxes as far as the strata reports. High strata doesn't necessarily mean bad quality and not managed well. In fact, it can mean the opposite. So little things like that. Big balcony for us was really important. So
to sum all that up, you basically came to the conclusion that if you were going to insist on 3 bedrooms, you were suffering in some other way, in a number of other ways, by the sounds of it.
Totally. Like I was looking, I remember, so one of the first properties that we got way too excited on was like on a main road in DY.
I'm glad you didn't buy that.
Yeah. It was on the less less attractive side of DY, where they had it was right near a school, in a block.
Two big ones there. Yep.
In a block of townhouses, and the townhouse was it was 2 bedrooms upstairs and 2 bedrooms downstairs. So it was, and one of them was more of a study. So it was a 3-bedroom plus study. It was great, as in it ticks the box as far as 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, but it was all these other things where we're just like, it screamed no. Like, just because it's 3 better does not mean that it's the right solution for you. And I think I got swept up in 3-bedroom. Yeah.
Great.
It's interesting. What about some of the ones that you missed out on? And when I say missed out on, because you're in that process of getting the finance approved, any of those that, you have said that you think you bought better in the end, but, what was going on for you when you knew you were going to miss out on them? Were you sort of tempted to take risks?
I'm not. I'm a risk-averse person. There was one property in Narrabeen which was on Ocean Street, but literally almost across the road from the beach. And it was a beautiful 2-bedroom with a large study, so you could have fit a 3rd bedroom in there just in a single bed. And we were looking at that, going, this is awesome property. But the real estate agent was lovely, and he kind of said, look, there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. And he started rattling off all of these things that were listed in the strata report, but a lot of other bidders had not mentioned. And I was like, okay, this is something that we need to take into consideration. And we missed out on that one. It ended up selling a couple of weeks later, and we thought that our pre-approval was going to come in, and I wasn't prepared to put down an offer until I had my pre-approval, and I'm glad I didn't. And it ended up selling. But I mean, when I continued to do research into that area and realised it was outside of the flood zone that's in Narrabeen, because Narrabeen Lakes has this really bad flood zone on one side and less on the other. But it had been damaged previously in a big kind of, like, I think it was 2016, maybe 2017, I've forgotten, but when there was these big storms. So, it's interesting when you do more research into an area, the deeper you go, looking at floods and things like that, you can start to get a better understanding of where you're buying and why it was a good decision not to go down that road.
Oh, that local knowledge is absolute gold, isn't it? I mean, particularly in Brisbane, Meighan's you're always talking about floods, aren't you?
Look, and you talk about a floodplain, Mike, but in Brisbane, it's even property specific. It's such a hilly topography that you need to know almost house by house what does get affected and doesn't get affected. So good on you. Well done for doing that level of research and understanding so much in depth about the local information that you needed to know to either not buy in that area or to be really well aware, if you were going to buy in that area, what the risks were.
Did you ever suffer from information overload? I mean, you're doing a lot of research. You obviously did our course. Did you ever get to a point where you think, oh, too much?
Yeah, I mean, it got to the weekend where sometimes you're just like, I don't want to go out and see another property this weekend. I just want to relax.
That's called decision fatigue.
Yeah.
I had a new client tell me yesterday, he said, if I have to go and look at one more property that does not suit me, I think I might just stop altogether. So it absolutely does. So you get to the point where you just want it to end, but you don't want to make a bad decision, rush forward on something that you just to end the process.
Yeah, people do though. Now, Mike, you this was a sort of a half off market, i.e. it was a fake off. We call them fake off markets, is when it's on the market but only via the agent's database. As you said, it wasn't on the major portals. So that's what you did there, was great groundwork in making yourself known to all those agents in those areas. So at least you're getting that information coming through your inbox. But so obviously you didn't have to worry about auction, but you made an offer. You went through that process of making an offer. Describe for me the time from making the offer to getting it accepted and actually making it unconditional. How did that go for you?
That was that was like the most nerve-wracking part, because I made the offer and we didn't hear anything for at least a day. And I'm like, oh, did they get the email? Did they not get the email? Because you have to send it formally, right? And then I called up the next day and he said, well, we're still going to show the property. And I go, okay, so my offer wasn't accepted. And he said, well, actually, your offer is slightly higher than the last one, but we're going to keep showing the property until we get someone that puts in a deposit. And so I said, all right, well, if the lady's going to accept my offer, then great, I'll put in a deposit. And then I rushed to, like pretty much I said, great, well, are we good? That he goes, yep, I'll talk to her. And, an hour later, he called me back. He goes, look, they'll accept your offer, but you got to get your deposit in. She really just wants to sell. She doesn't mind. So yeah, that's what I did. I had to rush out, go to the bank, get that sorted, send it out. I went to the bank to do the deposit for some reason. It just felt better rather than transferring it online and all of that. And I got my deposit in.
Like
are you a millennial?
There.
Are you a millennial or Gen Z? What are you?
I don't know.
I would have thought everything's online for you guys.
Yeah.
So you got the money. Sorry, you went and paid the deposit. So that's the 10% deposit, was it?
Yeah. Well, I chose for 5. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Yeah, and you
just wanted some consideration to see that you were realistic. At that point, now, Veronica, New South Wales being different to other states in terms of exchange and so forth. So at that point, was it a legally binding offer, or was it just, was there a contract that was exchanged? Where were you at that point, having paid the deposit?
Yeah, it was all a bit of a blur, wasn't it? Yeah, there was a contract exchange.
Yes.
So
there was, And was it a conditional contract? So you were able to do some conditions, satisfy some conditions.
Yeah, I had some conditions in there. It was little things like we don't want to keep, it was like everything was fine. It was just like 60-day terms. And it was just like, we don't want there to be any of these things, because she had all of her original, like, just everything, couch, bed, stuff, bar, awesome bar, by the way.
Did you keep that?
I gave it to one of my, I got some great tradies, and one of my mates, I gave it to him, and he's like, painting it and doing it up and everything. Cool. It's like original 1977. Yeah,
they were big in the 70s.
Yeah, having a bar was really important then, wasn't it?
Apparently. When you walked in, it had this disco-y, kind of light. It was really funny with the lights all kind of shining down. And it was very like, there was that actor, I've forgotten his name. Anyway, yeah, it was just very groovy.
Very groovy. So, okay, so you...
so you exchange conditionally.
But hang on, when you say conditionally, so let's just clarify this. In different states have different requirements, right? The contract in New South Wales, if it's conditional, what that means is that you put in that, you say, right, I don't want those things, or I do want those things. That's my offer. It's conditional to you agreeing to that. There's no backing out if they don't. That's their obligation. They have to take out whatever is agreed that they're going to take out. They have to leave whatever's agreed that they're going to leave. But the contract is binding once you exchange. Did you exchange? There's 2 ways to exchange contracts, though, in New South Wales, is with a cooling off period and without a cooling off period. Now, what happened with you?
I had to waive the cool-off period.
Yeah, I thought you might have.
Yeah.
Yes.
I also had my conveyancer just do all of that negotiation, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you had that contract sorted out and agreed to before you delivered it with your signature on it, and you deposit.
All happened in the day.
Yeah. And your conveyancer would have had to actually put a certificate in that contract, say it's a 66W, to say that you can waive the cooling off. And in New South Wales, the conveyancer or your lawyer has to do that. In other states, to waive a cooling off period, like in Queensland, how easy is it up there, Meighan?
You can just sign a document waiving the cooling off period yourself.
Which means that in Queensland, you need to, if you're going to do the Home Buyer Academy course, your first home buyer guide, that bit about understanding what's involved before you sign a contract. You absolutely have to do that, every single bit of that course, because
absolutely
you can waive the cooling off period. At least in New South Wales, you're somewhat protected because the conveyancer actually goes through the contract, has to advise you on that contract, so you can't accidentally sign yourself up for something that
you
could
can't get out of.
Seriously detrimental. Yeah. So there are protections in New South Wales that don't exist elsewhere. And so once you're signed without a cooling off period, because that's effectively like buying under auction conditions. It's once it's signed and you've handed it over with your deposit check, you're committed to buying that property in 60 days. You've got to pay the rest of the balance. How did you feel then? You must have felt sick. Did you?
I did. I'm like, I can't believe I'm parting with all of this money.
It's taken you all this time to save it. Now you're giving it to someone else.
So long. We were looking from like, I think it was back in 2010. I was like, you know what? I think this is the year I'm going to buy a property.
2010?
2010?
Yeah, 2010. We were like, yep, this is the year we're going to buy a property. And then we pushed it out. And then it got to 2015 and we were just like, clearly we just like, it was back in 2010, you're like, yeah, let's buy property. And then you're just like, no, not going to happen. Put it on the shelf. And then got serious again in 2015, started looking in Hornsby because that was the only affordable place that we thought we could get into. And then we parked that once we kind of like looked at Hornsby more. And it's a great area for some, but just not for what we were after. But anyway, so we parked it. And,
so that was version 2. And when did you get stuck into version 3?
Probably about 8 months ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So for you,
10-year program.
10-year process. But this time it was about 8 months from when you said, yep, you know what, we got
serious 8 months ago. I think when we started looking 10 years ago, it was kind of just like, oh, that'd be nice. That'd be nice. And we went to a couple of open homes. That was about it. Didn't have any idea what we were doing.
Wow, that's interesting. So that whole first home buyer process can take. Had you saved up much money back 10 years ago?
I'd been given an inheritance, a very small one. I think it was like 50 grand. And that was, that was what we needed at the time. But that money started going when we had to get married and paid for, trip overseas and, just being silly with our money, right?
Ooh.
Okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right.
But
so then
now,
you had to resave again.
Yeah.
So now you've got the home, you've moved in.
Not yet.
Oh, you're still
renovating.
Still renovating.
Yeah.
Because you should have seen it. Very chic.
Shake Grandma's house.
Pardon?
Did you have
Grandma's
shag whole
house?
carpet?
Oh, the carpet. Oh, like my toddler. I'm so like fearful of her. Like she's right into Teletubbies and all of that kind of stuff at the moment, and the Night Garden. And there's this little character which walks around with its red blanket, and she's like lying on the ground copying, this little character. And it was that old that I'm like, oh, she's gonna get sick. Like it was old. It was. Yeah, I'm like, no. And it was really interesting. You could see the history of this person and how she lived just in the carpet, like where she'd walked around the bed, because there was a bed there was lining around the bed, and there was lining in the carpet where she'd put her feet every day when she was watching a bit of TV and just
wow.
Yeah,
amazing.
that's all gone now. We've got these amazing floorboards that are down that are getting done as we speak. Shout out to Solomon's Flooring in Willoughby. Those guys are legends.
I'll be giving you a discount.
Nice plug.
plug. Bear Plumbing, plug. Those guys are awesome too. I don't know if I've got any others that I need to shout out.
So you're putting in your kitchen and bathroom and floors and painting everything before you move in? Okay.
Eventually. So painting, we've got this cabin-styled kitchen that is getting a paint, and we're getting a dishwasher put in. Floorboards are going down, and the paint has been epic. And so we're just getting all that stuff done now. Really, I call out to everyone if you're moving into a strata building, you want to understand whether or not you can just put down floorboards straight away. We had to do a lot of work to get that done. Much work.
Right.
So much work.
Yeah, really good tip. So we were going to ask you, what's your one piece of advice for first home buyers who are still climbing the mountain, and maybe that's it, but I'm sure you've got something to add, but did you have to batten underneath and put soundproofing in and all of that?
Yeah, regular pole K552 and because of a certain decibel. You've got some characters in buildings, hey. Like there's this particularly one guy in our building who used to be a builder back in a previous life, and he's all like very to the T, and he doesn't even live anywhere near me in the building, yet he's very opinionated on what needs to go down. So we just it's easier not to argue with some of those people. So we paid the additional amount for the special regular pole, and that was what got it over the line. And good prep.
And we'll hopefully keep neighbourly relations on a positive footing that you did the extra.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to have arguments with your neighbours.
It is something when we look at apartments that have flooring down, though, the very first thing I want to know is, did you get approval? Because you definitely don't want to be buying something and it looks like it's got lovely floors and then be told you have to rip it up.
So true. So true.
So
Mike, that's been sensational. But Veronica.
Yeah, do you have a parting piece of advice for those intrepid first home buyers who are still climbing that big mountain?
It's a difficult one, right? You gotta save, but don't go down the road of the high rise or the house and land package unless you absolutely had to. I'm so glad I didn't, and I avoided that. I've just got mates that have been burnt by it already. There's a guy at work who bought one of the places in St. Leonard's and it cost him over $1 million, and he's had issues and he can't move in. And it's just, I think that's probably, invest in a good team, and this is your first property, so just make a wise decision and probably try and go for low density. That'd be my biggest thing, because it's not so much. You've got to think long term.
Well, preaching from the hymn book. So
fabulous.
We're on board with you there. Mike, we're so thrilled for you guys. When you've finished your tart up, do you want to send us some photos? Because this episode will have a blog that goes with it. Send some before and afters, and we'll add them to the blog post for this episode. We're just so thrilled to have been part of your journey, and we're so thrilled that you got there. I know when you sent me photos when you were in that process, you're just about to make your offer and you shot them through. I was like, oh, I like the outlook. I like the big balcony. I like the size. There's a lot of real, and I love what we call a nana's house or a nana's home. It's been well loved. It's
big
had a
bones.
and really good bones, and you're going to make the most out of that. We're so thrilled for you.
Yeah, that confidence that you gave me by even just replying to the messages actually really helped to justify, because you're so scared as a first home buyer that you're going to make the wrong decision. And knowing that you've been through a process with professionals really adds a lot of weight to the process. And if you've got any anxiety as a first home buyer, going through the Home Buyer Academy will help to relieve that.
Oh, well, we didn't even pay you to say that, so thank you.
Yes.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. Well, thanks, Mike. We wish you all the best. Don't forget to send the photos through.
Will do. Thank you.
In this episode, we've covered a very small part of our 10-step online course for first home buyers. If you would like to learn more about the process and how to buy without making a mistake, then head over to our website, www.homebuyeracademy.com.au. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss an episode. And if you like what you've heard today, please give us an iTunes review. 5 stars would be wonderful. It will help others find us as well.
Thank you for joining us. We hope you found this really useful. And if you have, please share the love with others who you know are in the same boat. We'll be back next week with some more priceless stuff.